The Florida Gators are currently annihilating the 2024 recruiting cycle, and we're going to talk about it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Tuesday. As you everydayers know, I am Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And yeah, we're talking recruiting today, but don't worry. John Garcia will be here later in the week, so don't worry about that one. But before we talk with John on Thursday, we are going to talk about the latest On 300 rankings that came out for 2024. And On 300 is, of course, the top 300 for On 3, but a little play on words. That's super fun. Everydayers now. I like wordplay, but yeah, let's talk about it. First up, we'll talk about DJ Lagway because, of course, DJ Lagway is, whether or not you think he's the best in this recruiting class so far, he's the most important commit for the Florida Gators in 2024. He is also the best, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. He's the quarterback. He's the most important. 20th on 3, and by their national composite, he is the 23rd player in the country. I have no issue with that. I know the physical tools that DJ Lagway has. I know his potential, his ceiling, all that fun stuff. I know that you've been seeing tons of reports from recent weeks of, yep, DJ Lagway showed up at this camp, and guess what? He annihilated. It was very windy, and he was consistently accurate because he's nice like that. And you see clips of him throwing touchdowns in 7-on-7s and at these camps, and that's fantastic. That's one of the ways that players like quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and DBs can really help themselves in these camps and in the off season in terms of getting in front of more eyes. DJ Lagway is doing just that, and he's annihilating, and I'm incredibly proud of him for that because he's gone through this whole process and he hasn't been making waves for anything negative. He's been doing his job, right? That's awesome. Who hasn't been doing their job here? I know I don't like to bash people that do this for a living. Like, I don't like to bash people who work in media or who have to do this recruiting ranking thing, which is incredibly difficult. However, I do have an issue with Chad Simmons, and I know I'm thought of as an On 3 hater. That's not true. But I do have an issue with Chad Simmons because maybe you don't deserve the right to give an opinion on some guys, especially when it's now happened multiple times with recruits, not just from Florida, but from other universities as well, going in Twitter spaces and talking about, well, you know, Chad Simmons is, he said that he'll drop my ranking for whatever reason, one of which being, you know, he doesn't tell people in advance, or if they don't tell him in advance where they're committing, because he wants to be Steve Wiltfong just so bad. He does. He wants to be Steve Wiltfong so bad. And so maybe Chad Simmons doesn't deserve to give a ranking on some players. One of those players, most notably, Myles Graham, of course, because yikes, that's a rough one for Myles Graham, or not for Myles Graham, but about Myles Graham from On 3. It's kind of embarrassing at this point, if we're being honest. And I understand everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not going to say, oh, Myles Graham, like you can't be lower on Myles Graham than you are on everybody else, or than everybody else is on him. But we know that Myles Graham is one of those players who there's a story about Chad Simmons wanting to drop his ranking for whatever reason. And that's a little bit of a coinky-dink, right? Or is it not coincidental at all? Myles Graham on 24/7 is the 58th national player. On ESPN, he's the 60th national player. On Rivals, Myles Graham is the 13th ranked player in the nation. Yeah, that's an outlier. And the issue with On3 is that they are an outlier. But it's not even that they're an outlier that is the issue. The issue is how egregious it is from On3 to have Myles Graham as the 190th player in the nation. It's an absolute joke. And I think that I'm generally not unbiased, because everybody has their own bias, but I like to think I'm generally honest with these things. And that I'm not just, ooh, Gator, he's a god. That's not what I like to do. But to have him as 190th is kind of disgusting. That brings him to 49th by their composite. And yes, like I said, Rivals is an outlier, but it's not nearly as egregious as 190th, 130 spots below the next lowest ranking for him. That's ridiculous. Like genuinely, if you're going to have a ranking like that, you shouldn't be allowed to just rank him. Like, just be like, yeah, no, we're gonna pass on this one. If you're going to do it like that, because that's just absurd. There's no way around it. That's a horrible ranking. He should not be allowed to have an opinion on Myles Graham, because anybody with eyes and more than one working brain cell that has watched Myles Graham play football before knows there's not 189 high school players better than him. Not just high school players in the 2024 class. There are not 189 high school football players in the country in general that deserve to be ranked higher than Myles Graham. That's just not true. You can convince me of 100 or 120. 189? That's disgusting. Myles Graham, we know his physical skill set. We know his pedigree, and obviously his pedigree doesn't go into it, but we know what Myles Graham generally is as a football player. And to put him as 190th, you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. You should, because that's pathetic. You should be embarrassed. There's no other way around it. I don't have any other words to say other than you're a moron. If your opinion is genuinely 190th, you're a moron. It's as simple as that. Just like, either admit that there's some personal thing going on there. But if you look at me and you go, yeah, I watched his tape and he's the 190th overall player in the country, dummy. I almost just dropped profanity there, because that's how stupid it is. But we're going to move into where On3 actually doesn't destroy their own reputation because they want to be petty and they want to be and they want to bring personal feelings into rankings. But first, today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, my #1 sportsbook, and the official sponsor of Locked On, the official sportsbook of Locked On. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. But that ain't even the important part I want to talk to you about. I need to tell you about all the profit boosts they've been giving out, because, man, they've been free money. Literally, you take the boost of, it could be minus 109, and you can get a whatever percent boost, and then it's plus money. It's plus 116. And oh my goodness, now you're making money for something that should happen. Should. The minus means that it should happen. Odds makers think it'll happen. So you can make plus money on that now. That's a fantastically sound investment if you're smart about it. So I'm just saying, profit boosts, money, 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 money. That's all I'm saying. But also, don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're going to talk about two other defenders here, where On3 is lower than some other places, but we're not going to harp on those. We only wanted to harp on the rankings for Myles Graham because that was stupidly egregious. But Xavier Phillips, the safety out of Texas, the newest Florida Gators commit, which what an awesome time to commit at halftime of the spring game. Yeah, I know it happened with I believe both Miami and Florida State as well. But guess what? We did it first. That's the benefit of having the Thursday game. But Xavier Phillips is the 32nd overall player according to the On3 composite. And also when you're talking composite, it's kind of important to talk about what composite you're using. If I don't specify my composite, just know I'm using 24/7. That's what I do. But Xavier Phillips, 32nd On3 composite, 48th On3 overall. Now, I know that I believe it's the top 32 players on On3 get a 5-star ranking, which means at 32nd, Xavier Phillips would be a 5-star. He's not yet. He's still 4-star listed. But by the end of the cycle, I believe the top 32 players get that 5th star. So Xavier Phillips will be a 5-star when it's said and done, when that's all updated. I think that he is someone who's going to rise up a little bit more to be a composite 5-star without being, 32 on the ranking. But this kid's an absolute animal. Like, there's no other way to put it. Xavier Phillips a freak. Like, he's an awesome football player. Not only does he have the potential to be a day one contributor, I think he will be a day one contributor somewhere in the secondary. That versatility and his current skill set right now, he can show up on campus in Gainesville, and I think they'd be like, hey, man, like, do you want to pad up? Because we think you could step in right away. So his skill set right now, I think, is good enough to be a day one contributor in this secondary, let alone next year when he's got time to even further fill out his frame, further develop, and further just improve. I think Xavier Phillips is someone that we're talking about, next spring game. We're going to be like, all right, he's competing for a starting spot right now. I think he's that good. And I genuinely he's awesome. There's just no other way to put it. Corey Raymond nailed this one. If you can keep Xavier Phillips, I think he's going to end up being the best defender from this class, more than Myles Graham, more than the guy we're about to talk about in Adarius Hayes. But I think Xavier Phillips genuinely not only could be, but will be the best defender from this Florida Gators 2024 recruiting class, which is a big win, right? Obviously. But also, Adarius Hayes is the other guy that we're talking about in this segment. On3 is considerably lower on Adarius Hayes than they are on Myles Graham. Maybe they just can't recruit. Maybe they just can't scout linebackers. But it isn't as egregious, obviously, as Myles Graham was. The On3 composite has him as the 64th overall player. They have him as the 106th player, which, yeah, that's not horrible, right? I don't even care about the ranking for him because given his height, his length, I don't want to say his weight because I personally believe he needs to bulk up quite a bit. But his height and his length and his athleticism, his skill set, what we've seen on tape, I cannot wait to see him in a Florida Gators uniform, outside of the promotional stuff. I want to see him playing for the Florida Gators on Saturdays because I think that he's going to be such a fun piece for Austin Armstrong to use. Adarius Hayes might not contribute early on, just because genuinely, I think he's incredibly lean looking, incredibly thin looking. And I think he's either going to have to bulk up to play off-ball linebacker or he's going to have to move to the edge full-time, which we can talk about where they go, he's listed as an edge, but Florida has said they plan on using him like an off-ball linebacker. He wants to play off-ball linebacker. He plays off-ball linebacker in high school. Maybe you can say, yeah, if he doesn't bulk up, he's probably going to have to play on the edge, which is also weird because it's like, well, that's weird that the lighter guy should play on the edge, but it's true. Playing that off-ball linebacker spot as an edge rusher, you can be a little bit more wiry early on, where most of your job is getting around people as opposed to trying to get through people like you would do as an off-ball linebacker. But assuming that he does stick to an off-ball linebacker, because I don't like to say, oh, he's going to play this different position, unless we know he is going to play this different position. So if you use him as an off-ball linebacker, I love it. I love it in terms of what he can be. Like I said, I don't think that unless he bulks up considerably from now or from the last time we've seen him until he gets to Gainesville, I don't know if he's ready to contribute early. But his skill set and his athleticism, it's going to be a beast. I just think that with his ability to shoot gaps and his ability and his athleticism, I think that when you talk about him as a pass rusher, which everybody does, he gets to play that from the off-ball spot. He gets to blitz. He gets to operate in the A-gap. That's something we saw a lot in the spring game, actually, that I wasn't fully expecting to see as often as we saw it, but working in the A-gap with an off-ball linebacker, Shamar James stepping up, right up whoever the center was at that time, watching Shamar James step up and be that A-gap defender, whether or not he was rushing the passer or not. I think if you have Adarius Hayes there, that's also a great threat because they see him as a solid pass rusher. He's going to be then put into a one-on-one, or he's going to be dropping back into coverage where he's got insane length, and he can just crowd the line of scrimmage as well, where he could be rushing the passer. And I need to see if they're going to teach Adarius Hayes, when you're rushing the passer, if you're not getting home, can you get your hands up and deflect the ball because he's so long? So there's that. To wrap up with the rest of these rankings, first up, we'll talk about Chauncey Bowens, who is obviously the first running back commit for the Florida Gators. 91st, according to On3. He's 215th by their On3 national composite, but that will go up when 24/7 updates their rankings, because right now on 24/7, Chauncey Bowens is a 3-star without a ranking. And he might stay a 3-star. He'd be, the higher end of the 3-star. But he doesn't have a national ranking, which I'm sure hurts a little bit with them, where he's probably also going to jump up a little bit. He's someone who, we kind of talked about this with John Garcia a month-ish ago, where we said, hey, Chauncey Bowens not super high ranked, but Georgia wants him, Bama wants him, Ohio State wants him, Florida has him. It's one of those things where these premier programs see him and they go, oh, you can contribute in the SEC. You can contribute in the college football playoff. And the recruiting sites will eventually start ranking him higher and higher and higher. And it's going to be yet another player. Chauncey Bowens is going to be yet another player where we look at that at National Signing Day and we see whatever he's ranked, it's going to be higher than 91st. And we're going to say, damn, Billy Napier did it again. He was in on someone before their astronomical rise. He was in on them and he had them committed before that rise. And he did it again. He did it again. He locked him in again. Then you look at the other running back in Kahnen Daniels, who On3 is the only place that has him with a numerical ranking right now. He is currently 277th. He's 310th by their national composite. He's probably also going to be a riser, but even if he's not, he's one that I'm especially not worried about, because I had this conversation off air with John Garcia, which is a fun thing to do, by the way. But I had this conversation off air with John Garcia where what I came away from that conversation with was basically, if you're a running back and at the level that Daniels is at, if you're a running back, which I know, he did the Wildcat quarterback thing and they just ran the ball a ton. But if you can run in that league, basically, if you can run in that league in Mississippi, you're a good runner. Like, you're a good, successful running back. So I don't care that it's like, he played quarterback, Wildcat quarterback. He did this, he did that. I don't care. I don't care what his ranking is either. He's one of those players where, and it's also me just going, John told me this. I watched the tape. Daniels is good. John kind of got rid of the Max Brown tape where it's like, but who's he playing? John knocked that one out for me where he's like, if you can run in that league, you can run. And so for Daniels, I don't care what his ranking is. I'm comfortable with the tape. I'm comfortable with what he looks like. Don't care if he rises or not. Hell, don't make him rise. I don't care. Make him look like an even bigger success story when he works out for the Florida Gators. So be it. And the last player, who is the only Florida Gator not in the On 300, Josiah Davis. He is 474th by their national composite. And I would like to say that Josiah Davis is probably the Tyree Patterson of the Florida Gators 2023 recruiting class, where, he's in early and he's a low-ranked guy. He's in early as a low-ranked recruit, and we go, okay, he's probably going to rise. Billy's probably in early on him as well, and then he's going to rise up, and he'll be ranked with the rest of the Gators. But he's also going to be he probably is right now the biggest decommit risk, just considering, Florida just got Xavier Phillips, same high-ranking safety. Florida's in on Jordan Pride, high-ranking safety. Florida's in on many other high-ranking safeties, and I want to make it clear, when I just stumbled, I didn't say Georgia. I combined Jordan and Florida, because I'm now realizing it sounds like I'm in Georgia, Florida. I just combined Jordan and Florida. I would never mistake Florida for Georgia. And yes, so Josiah Davis is probably the biggest decommit risk right now. And he's also obviously the biggest candidate to rise just because he's so low. So he's probably the Tyree Patterson of the 2024 cycle, where Tyree Patterson was 2023, committed to Florida for a long time. He was one of the first commits, if not the first commit, for Billy Napier in the 2023 class. And then, of course, he ended up going to Central Florida. We knew towards the end that it was like, yeah, he's not coming to Florida. We know this. And Josiah Davis is probably in that pool right now where we look at him, or at least I look at him, as the same way. So overall, Florida, 6 of their 7 commits are in the on 300. One of their commits is not, obviously, in Josiah Davis, and one of their commits is horribly, horribly underranked because of a personal vendetta that is stupid and disgusting, and you shouldn't be allowed to rank players like that, but whatever. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We're available daily and free reviews in the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.